From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Portland's 911 system is clogged with calls about people experiencing homelessness or other behavioral health issues on the city streets. Many times there's no need for a response involving a badge or a gun, but Portland police often deal with these calls because there's nowhere else for people to turn. But Eugene has been using a different model of response to calls that don't necessarily need police intervention. They've been doing it for decades. And Portland is taking notice. We'll talk to the new executive director of Street Routes to find out how it would work here. And later in the show, think Oregon is green, environmentally friendly? An Oregonian investigation will have you rethinking that. We'll hear from the reporter behind the series, Polluted by Money. First, let's meet the executive director of Street Routes, Kaia Sand. Welcome to Straight Talk. Your first time here. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laurel.
You took over as executive director when Israel Bear stepped down late last year. What have these first months been like for you?
They've been extraordinary because I get to be part of an organization that's about bringing people together across housing status, which I think is something that we really need in our city. All kinds of people care whether they're housed or they're homeless. And so with Street Routes, we bring people together on street corner by street corner because we have people who are homeless or extremely poor, 170 of them, selling it every week, selling the newspaper. And it's also a hand up for people because they buy the paper for a quarter and they sell it for $1. They're acting as their own kind of micro entrepreneurs out there on the city streets.
And for people who haven't seen, I'm sure they have on the street corners, this is a copy of one of your editions that one of your special reports will be talking about. You not only do things involving the paper, which has a circulation of about 10,000, you also do advocacy for people who are homeless. And I want to show our viewers some numbers because this topic is so important to our viewers. A new DHM poll shows 33% of respondents say homelessness is the biggest concern facing the city. That's up significantly. In 2011, only 1% said it was the top issue. So only in 8 years that jumped. The Willamette Week reports the Portland Police Bureau receives a call about an unsheltered, unwanted person frightening or inconveniencing someone. Every 15 minutes they get a call like that. And the Oregonian reported people experiencing homelessness account for 52% of Portland Police Bureau arrests in 2017. Kaia, should police be handling all these calls?
No. Because we need the right mission for the right job, and the Portland Police Bureau's mission is one of criminal enforcement. And so when the issue is when the crisis is not a crime, then we need different first responders.
What happens when police show up to something like that when somebody's having a mental health crisis?
Well, you know, there are plenty of police who are trying to do good work. They're trying to do social work, and what I would say is that we actually need to have the right first responders. We shouldn't depend on people to have a kind of discretion each time they show up for a call. Because what we find at Street Routes is too often things go awry. We have a lot of our folks tell us stories. That's why we ended up really doing this report. This plan. They tell us stories of getting entangled in legal messes that often have to do with just being homeless. This morning at our vendor meeting, 70 people packed into our office. We were talking about this plan. There's a lot of excitement, and one of our vendors said, you know, sometimes I'm so tired and I'm asked to move again and again and again, and an officer asks me to move, and then I suddenly blow up, and then things get worse and they get worse. So what we think is we need different first responders, not a badge and a gun, when the crisis is not a crime. And in Eugene, we see a model where actually the first responders, a medic and a crisis worker, are able to actually listen, and they show up just in a different way, a way that emphasizes public health.
And I want to talk about the Eugene model in just a moment, but you're talking about the special report that you did in Street Routes, Rethinking Our First Response, and you dig into a lot of these issues. And one of them is about how many people have died in Portland when there has been a police response with people who have mental health crises. The Street Routes special report says since 2017, Portland police shot 7 people experiencing a mental health crisis, 6 people who were under the influence, and 7 of those 13 people died. That's according to the Mental Health Association of Portland.
Yeah, so it is when in its worst moments an issue of life and death. So one of the things that I think happens is that we, as a city, we try to use the resources we have. And since we have a police bureau, we keep trying to bend it to fit the problems that we have. But a lot of the issues right now are not about criminality. They're about desperation, they're about mental health crises, they're about trauma from poverty, of being on the streets, right? So all of those things aren't really police issues.
And one of the things you talk about in this special report is it is not just police, though, that are spending a lot of time dealing with people who are homeless. A lot of city workers are having to spend a lot of hours per day, which is costing a lot of money.
That's right. Two PSU social work students did a research project, and they looked at only 3% of the city budget, and they analyzed it for what they called reallocated personnel costs. They found more than $3 million in these kinds of reallocated costs that really are mostly about enforcing rules and laws against unhoused people. So we look at that and we think, we're just going about it the wrong way. We need to stop focusing on making life harder, and we need to make actually pretty dramatic systemic changes so that we're compassionate, we're constructive, we're smart about how we're dealing with this.
And you're looking at a model in Eugene you mentioned, it's called Kahoots. It's been going on for 30 years.
That's right.
And Kahoots is short for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. They have vans with logos like this. It's a non-traditional alternative to a police response to these types of calls. The mayor went down there in January to see how the center works. You went down there.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how this system works?
Sure, and actually the police chief went down there too. It's very exciting, and this Commissioner Joanne Hardesty's staff. So there's a lot of leadership that's interested. I did a ride-along for an entire day with a medic and a crisis worker, and it was so striking because so many of the calls that they fielded would basically be the so-called unwanted persons reports that you described in terms of the Willamette Week report on how every 15 minutes the 911 dispatcher is receiving one of these calls. So that was really illustrative to me, that I could look at how it's being done differently in Eugene. And just to give a couple quick examples, I think of one where some people at a convenience store called. A man was acting out. He was in crisis on the street. Well, when Kahoots showed up, they were able to listen to him, and they were able to find the story underneath the story, is how they described it to me. So they found out why he was in distress. He had an untreated wound, which they tended to. He needed to get to a cancer center for his treatment. And so of course that was causing him a lot of agitation, and Kahoots was able to just simply drive him there. In another call, it was around this sort of the sorority fraternity row in Eugene. Someone called because someone was sleeping in the alley. This would be a common call in Portland. Kahoots could show up, give him a granola bar, and I think a can of sausage, and transport him to a place where he could be safe. It didn't have to escalate. There were no guns. Things didn't get worse. They got a little bit better. And I think that is so striking about how they approach it. One call involved the police. So sometimes they're sent out with the police. And when that happens, often it's the police asking for Kahoots backup. And in this case, a woman was in mental health crisis, and it was a very sad situation. She was really at risk of harming herself. So the police officer said to me, if it had just been us, we would have had to put her in custody and in handcuffs to take her to Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene. But instead, Kahoots could transport her, not add to her trauma, and in fact, calm things down, listen to her.
How do you think that model would be accepted by people here in Portland?
I think that so many people would support this. I hear this all the time in my position at Street Roots. People are asking me all over the city, what can we do? How can we be constructive? How can we de-escalate crises? Business owners, I just talked to a group of hospitality workers. They want to be better at de-escalating crises. So I think that, it would be really well supported. And in fact, I'm hearing from people since we released this report all over who want to support it. So I will say that you can endorse this plan. Just go to...
There's a website.
Yeah, there's a website, portlandstreetresponse.org. portlandstreetresponse.org. Go on there, endorse. You can figure out other ways to act, which I will say is to push push the city in terms of the budget.
Commissioner Hardesty is already on board.
Yeah.
She was here on Straight Talk last month telling us about what she wants to do with the 911 center, because her bureaus, the 911 center and the fire bureau, would be affected. She wants to start kind of a nurse triage center. Let's listen to what she told us here on Straight Talk.
What I know is that too many times we send the wrong first responder to those calls, and so we're going to revitalize that system. So by the time my first term is up, what we're going to have is a 911 system that knows exactly who to send. So if someone's suffering a mental health issue, we will send a mental health professional to that call.
So how much will this system cost? Always comes down to the bottom line.
Right. So the proposal that Commissioner Hardesty's office has put forward is to fund $187,000 toward developing the pilot for that system and ultimately for this kind of Portland Street response. We'd like to just keep pushing on that. Right now the budget office is not even supporting that. So people in our city need to write the mayor, they need to write the commissioners, show up on April 2nd, the first public forum around the budget. Get that funded, and then we also want to really push the city to act faster than the original proposal around this pilot, which is 3 years to revamp the 911 system. We think that we can start training people, we can start building it at the same time. Kahoots in Eugene is willing to help train our folks here in Portland. They're already working with Olympia, the city of Olympia, to do that. They're in conversation with Denver, with New York City. So it's all, the pieces are there.
And you have said now's the time. There's a groundswell to do something big.
There's a groundswell. We just need the will, we need the funding, and we need action.
Well, Kaia Sand, thank you for joining us. Good luck with everything.
Thank
we appreciate
you so
your being
much,
here.
Laurel.
Hope you'll come visit us again. And coming up next, is Oregon as green as you think? A look at the Oregonians' investigation, Polluted by Money, how corporate cash has affected Oregon's environment. We're back in 2 minutes.